Welcome to our weekly Being Your Own CEO Success Circle. This Success Circle is intended just for solopreneurs. Well, not just, but mainly. And this morning we are going to visit the topic of building a brand new website. So this will be a session that's particularly useful for somebody who's never built one before, as well as those of us who may be moving into building websites for other people and to sort of be able to develop a process. So I think this morning what we will do is and I will introduce everybody who is here just to give us more time to discuss. So I'll start at the top of my list. We have David Flannery, who is in Illinois, and he creates affordable websites. Good morning, David. And then we have Fred Jones, who is in British Columbia somewhere. And he facilitates leadership and community building for youth. I think the last time I talked to you, Fred, you were in Nanaimo. Correct. Okay. Let's see. Nathan Seagal is here, and he's here from Mexico. And he works as a copywriter, focusing on salesmanship in print. And let's see who else is here. Vivek, you are here, and Vivek is in the UK, and he simplifies life and business by unifying different technologies and developing software. And I will introduce myself. I'm in British Columbia as well. I am Victoria. And I like to coach retirees who want to create an online business.
Alana has joined us.
Yes, I was getting there. And Alana is here from Ireland. And she supports businesses by creating and maintaining their websites. So good morning, everyone. Happy that you all made it. And I decided to go for introducing everyone because I was very much aware we've probably got quite a lot of ground to cover this morning. So now before we go any further, I'm going to try to go to gallery view and see what happens. And last time I cancel spotlight view there. I don't know if that's going to work or not. We'll see. At least we see everybody who's here on the screen right now. So basically what I propose that we do this morning is to really begin at the very, very beginning. So what are some of the things that we need to consider before we ever start anything? And we had a little bit of a chat about that. And Fred, just to reassure you, we will get to a point where we will explain all that terminology that you were concerned about last time. So we built that in, or I built that in. So one of the first things that we need to consider, we decided, was to determine what the purpose of this website will be. What is the purpose? So in other words, and in that purpose, we would, first of all, determine your why. Thank you, Vivek. So, yeah. The purpose does include, however, the person or the audience that we're going to be speaking to. And David, you had some other ideas in relation to that. So would you like to add that? And
Yeah.
before I forget, I really need to acknowledge that Javita is out there in YouTube land. So good morning, Javita. Welcome.
Um, when I start a website, the first thing I do is to who am I building it for? Am I building it for a client or am I building it for myself?
Mm,
Then I dig into um, if it's for a client, who are their visitors going to be?
mm,
And if it's for me, who are my visitors going to be? Then I determine what kind of site it's going to be. Is it going to be a blog? Is it going to be a local business, a national business, and anything else after that?
mm,
Then I build what's called an avatar. An avatar is a person, a fictional person, and you can get it all elaborate and put a face to it and all of that. But it's basically the person that I'm trying to build the website for.
mhm,
And I'm trying to determine what their ideas are going to be.
mhm,
It could be I'm generating it, as I said, for Ernst Roofing. I've got a guy with a pan in his hand and a phone in his hand, trying to contact a roofer. So I need to be able to, address that situation
The
and so
guy,
forth. So
the guy that's got the leaky roof.
yeah,
Yeah,
the roof leaking, and he needs
yeah.
attention right now. Um, and uh, you
Mm,
know, so and you think about the other people that have a worn roof. Who is that going
mm,
to be? Is that going to that's going to be a homeowner? Um,
mhm,
is it going to be? Is it also going to be a landlord? Um,
mhm,
so you may end up making a couple avatars out of it. Is
mm,
it going to be commercial? A building person that building maintenance person that has to deal with his building um, leaking or needing a new roof and so
mhm,
forth. So I try to narrow it down, try to get it so that I'm only building for one or two people.
mhm.
And then I make sure if it's my client that they agree with my avatar and that that's who they think they should be looking for and go from there.
Mhm. So I might add a few things to my. I have a one-page avatar. I even have a picture, and in that, on that page, I've listed literally everything that I know about that person, what their online habits are, even their learning style, their what might be their business style, um, um, even a space for their story if there's a story there. Um, I really have a very extensive avatar. Yeah. So yes, determining that person, but I think there's something else. What that we need to really be thinking about, and that is what do we want the viewer to do? And so I guess that rolls into the why and the what the purpose is. So that would I mean it's really interesting how when you sit down and start thinking about all these little pieces that need to be thought through. One of the things that I did when I was doing a site for a client is I started with um, a mind map and mapped out even the what the page or the site might look like. So in the center I had the home page, and then I had various pages and what might be included on each one of those pages. So thinking through even you know what information needs to be and how to organize that information and all of that, all of that is work to do long before you even ever start.
I do
So,
mine a little different. I make sketches
ah,
on note paper,
mm-hmm,
and I do a lot of research in that I go to other websites that are for the same uh, purpose
mm-hmm,
and look at what they're doing.
mm-hmm,
And I do that research, and I don't copy, but it gives me ideas and it gives me the workflow, and it makes sure that I don't miss something that's important that needs to be addressed. And then
mm-hmm,
I I sketch out basically what I'm going to have on each page, so I have a general idea, and
mm-hmm,
that's how I go to that step.
mm-hmm. So, and when we talk about sketching it out, I did it with a mind map. You do it in a different way. I guess and I'm thinking about a recommendation that Jay made, and I don't know when he made that recommendation, but for all the websites that he's involved in, he creates a folder. I think in Google Docs, and every detail that is going to relate to that one website is all kept all in one place. So I think it's important for us to recognize that if we set up a little system to keep everything organized right from the beginning, then that helps us move along. So, Alana, I know that you build websites and you maintain websites. Can you think of anything at this stage that we've missed?
Um, well, just to expand a little bit on what you were talking about, I was thinking about the user experience because when you do build a website, you are building it to attract a certain customer or a certain audience. But once they get to the website, you want them to have a seamless experience because you want them to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be addressing, trying to make the website as easy to navigate as possible
Mm-hmm.
and to have the most pertinent information on the homepage so that, you have an opportunity to build some trust with your audience from the moment they hit your website. And because, hitting there will be people that will hit and miss your site.
Mm-hmm.
They'll come on, they'll read an article, and then they'll go away.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have an opportunity to give them some information that will, have them gain a little more trust in you, chances are they're going to come back and spend more time,
Mm-hmm.
which again goes back to the user experience.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because what I wrote down was decide what is important to your target reader. Yeah. So, yes, and I guess that goes along with the idea of stories, and we were gonna talk about that later, but maybe now is the time because we are going to need to do some marketing at some point, in some way. And we know that we need to be able to tell a story. That's what marketing is. It attracts people using a story. So, right at the outset, that's another thing we need to be thinking about is the stories. What stories we will use in order to um, communicate the message that is going to attract. Yeah. Um, I think, and you said something about easy navigation, and I guess what I wrote was define and describe what makes a great website enjoyable.
Well, I mean, visual, it has to be visually appealing because that's the other thing that happens is if someone comes onto a website and it's cluttered with ads and pictures and things that don't actually relate to your audience, they're not sticking around. Mm-hmm. And you want it to be something engaging that will capture their attention right away by showing pictures that they can connect with immediately. Mm-hmm. So I think imagery is quite important.
Yeah. So in following with that, it means that maybe even before you begin, you start doing your research in terms of your imagery. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So then I sort of thought to myself, well, what do I mean, we also need to think through the branding of the site. And again, this is something that gets thought through long before you even do it. And when we say branding, you know, the logo and the color combinations and the fonts, the style of fonts and all of those things. So those are all included in the visuals. Right. So then we decided also, I mean, there's a few other kind of practical things, deciding where you're going to host it and what will the URL be. And I did a search this morning to find out what's the definition for URL. And Miss Google said it's just nothing but the address of a website. But so I still don't know what URL stands for. Does anybody know?
I thought it was Universal Search Language or something.
I don't know.
Universal something. I can't remember. I can't remember.
And it's kind of amusing, isn't it, that there are certain things that creep into our language and that take on a certain role, and that's a perfect example of that. URL.
I'm gonna Google it right now.
It just means the address.
Uniform resource locator.
Okay.
Oh, uniform resource locator. Okay. Well, that doesn't really help us much, does it? Really?
No, it doesn't.
But
Domain name means more. More along the
domain
lines
name, yeah, the domain, and yes. So for the beginning person, and maybe who is doing this for the first time, that you can't create a website until you have a domain name that you have registered. And because you can't register a domain name that's already being used by somebody else. So there's a whole process to go through to make sure that you have a unique domain name. Thank you, David. That was instead of going along with URL, domain name is a good thing. So then,
your choice. May I expound a little bit on your domain name?
Mm-hmm.
Your domain name, I try to choose something that people are going to easily remember for my websites. I've gone away from going to the exact keyword that I'm trying to search for, and gone to something that's easier for them to remember and type in. So, you know, it's like solar, solar powered
Bicycles.
solar powered bicycles or something. I try to make it a little bit solar power hub or something along that line, so that it's easier and they're going to remember that, as opposed to, solar powered items that you can buy, or something along that line. So it just make it as short as possible, and make it as easy to remember and related to whatever the subject is.
Yeah, and I can certainly speak from experience. The style of that has changed over the years. I remember when I started way back in the 90s, I had a URL, workstyle-lifestyle.com. And that made the best sense. It meant a lot to people, etc. But as time went on, opinions changed, and people thought it was way too long and way too hard to figure out how to do it. So I dumped it. Okay, so now we get into some of the practicalities. We've decided on where we're going to host, and and we've got the domain name or the URL, and all of that. Well, then the next thing we have to decide is what sort of a platform are we going to use, and here's where we're going to get into some definitions. So what sort of a platform? Well, a lot of us are using WordPress, and WordPress is defined as being a content management system. Does that tell anybody anymore? I don't know, but that's the definition that I found. So, but it's important to realize that WordPress is not the only one that's out there. There's what's the one? Wix. There's an online one called Wix.
There's Wix, and there's Squarespace, there's Joomla.
Joomla, yeah.
And those are the popular ones.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
and what they're designed to do is to make your web building experience easier
Mm-hmm.
than what it used to be by putting in the HTML and the CSS code.
Yeah.
It allows you to do it
Okay.
easier.
We got to stop for a minute and say, what is HTML and CSS? It's all that coding. It's a special coding language that developers create websites with and other things. And not everybody know. I mean, some people go to school to learn that language, but it's what sites are doing now, what content management systems are doing now, is creating something that allows you to do what you want to do without having to know HTML coding, the language, the background.
Basically, it's like a HTML is what it's built on. WordPress and these other and the plugins and whatnot that go with it convert what you want done into the HTML
Mm-hmm.
and the CSS to make it look the way you want it to look.
Right.
Instead of you having to write all of that
Mm-hmm.
really hard code to
Mm-hmm.
get it to go the way you want.
So, David, what does CSS mean?
Oh gosh, I might have to look it up.
Cascading style sheet.
There you go, cascading styles. Thank you. I just couldn't think of it right on the top of my head.
But
You know-
those are the cascading style sheet defines how the HTML gets rendered. So then, I mean, it's when you actually see a page on your browser, you are actually seeing the HTML code being rendered in the form
Okay.
of text, images,
Mm-hmm.
with the attributes bold, italics, color, all
Mhm.
that. And the interaction, even the interaction that you may have, can also be handled by the HTML
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent.
So there we have the definitions, the definition and the explanation from a coding expert. Thank you, Vivek. Well, okay, so let's just say straight up that most of us are using WordPress. That's probably the most popular one now. I don't know how many millions of people are using the WordPress platform. So, but then once you've made that decision, usually when you choose a hosting company, quite often they will supply access to WordPress as part of your of your relationship. And of course, some of us are involved in Wealthy Affiliate, which is where we host a lot of our work there. The reason we kind of like Wealthy Affiliate also is because there are courses in there and instructional videos that show you how to do everything. So, and for me, there's an added thing that makes me want to support the whole thing is because they're a local company. They're based right here in Victoria, so that's an added one for me. So, all right. So now that you've got WordPress, you bring up you start working. You open WordPress, and then the next thing you need to do is decide what theme you're going to use. So, what is a theme? Well, a theme is an overlay that allows you to set up and set the whole thing up so that it works in a convenient sort of way. I don't know how else to describe a theme. Then as we start to work, we're probably going to be looking at plugins, and plugins are extra little overlays that will do will tell WordPress to do something in a certain way. So that especially if the theme doesn't include it, then sometimes you can use a plugin that allows you to do something that maybe the theme didn't allow you to do, or didn't provide the way to do it. Did I explain that adequately, you guys, or is there a better way to explain it?
I would like to give an explanation of a theme. And what my view is, it's the canvas that we're using to paint the website with.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I think of it as. It's what allows us to paint everything and make the colors and put all the neat little stuff in there on the painting. So
technically, I mean, it's a bunch of CSS files which would define how things appear and all that. So it's we did talk about CSS earlier. So a theme is a collection of CSS files which would render your web page in a certain way with a certain color, certain background, and all that.
Okay, and the other thing that go ahead, Alana.
No, I just wanted to, for everyone that might be listening, it might be good for if we know what rendering means. I think a lot of people may not know what that means. It's kind of a technical term. So I thought maybe rendering could use an explanation for our audience.
Well, how do we define rendering? It makes it do things that we want it to do. Is that good enough?
Okay.
I have to admit, I'm really enjoying this where we're trying to explain all these things, because I remember earlier during the lockdown period watching a couple of forestry scientists talking about forestry science, and they I was so frustrated because they used acronym after acronym after acronym. So I mean, this is what you run into when you're in a specialized area. The acronyms and terminology just gets bought in. Fred, go ahead.
I would just like to say, I think a theme is similar to a template.
Okay.
For example, if you have PowerPoint and you're creating a PowerPoint, you'll get templates. I think that a theme is very similar
Yeah.
to a template.
Okay, that's good definition. So there's another aspect that actually Jay brought out in one of his recent sessions that I think is an important thing to mention right here and now, is that there are many free themes. WordPress actually presents a brand new one each year, and they even name them by the year it is. And there are loads and loads of free themes out there. But as Jay said in a recent session, it's important to kind of consider the value of paying for, getting a paid theme. And there are a lot of good reasons to do that. And one of them is that the paid themes have a lot more support behind them, so that if you get stuck, you can talk to somebody who knows something about it and they will help you. So the support is there, but also the constant updating and plugging of security holes and all of those things. So he recommended very strongly that we all consider using a paid theme if we can afford to. And then when you get to what paid theme you want to access, well, there's a gazillion places you can go and look. And I don't want to go into all of that, because I think there would be we could go on and on. But there is an advantage to using a paid theme. So then there's a few other things that we need to think about. Should we get into the page builder content right now? Well, before we get to that, we have to say and remind people there are two different types of entries. There's a page and there's a post. And there's a difference between those two. The page is something that stays there and shows up usually in your menu. And people can go and find those pages very easily, and they remain. A post, on the other hand, goes in chronologic order. And so the way that the viewer gets to see things, usually they get to see the most recent post. So if you plan on adding things on a regular basis to your website, you might want to consider using posts as opposed to pages. I might mention I have an old website that I talked about last week, lowland.com. There are 200 posts on there, and probably maybe 15 pages. So there usually are fewer pages than there are posts, although that might not necessarily be true. Most themes allow you to go in and decide right from the get-go. Do I want to start off with a static home page, or do I want to start off with chronologic postings? So that's a decision that has to be made right out of the chute when you're doing that. Okay, now somebody mentioned somewhere, I guess it was in one of Jay's session on Friday, where he was talking about the back end dashboard, and there were people who did not know what that was. So it's kind of interesting to understand that when you're working with a website, you're looking at a back end and a front end. I guess it's the easiest way. The front end is what, when you go to visit the site and you see all the visuals, that's the front end. And there's probably another more technical term for that, but I think that'll do. But then there's the back end, and that shows all of the technical places where you make changes and add a post or add a page, and do the various kinds of customization that you may want to do to the theme. So the back end dashboard allows you to see all of that, and some themes now allow you to bounce back and forth, and some themes even allow you to see the result as you're making a change. So that depends on the theme that you happen to have decided to use. Okay, so I've explained everything except page builders and Gutenberg. But before we get there, is there anything else that you folks think we should mention in terms of what do we need to look at once we're on the site and we've got the theme open and we're starting to put in the content? Any thoughts about that, Alana?
Well, this goes back to user experience. So, if you have a site where you want to attract customers that are going to buy something that may require a shop of some sort or some sort of a payment feature, then that's something you need to consider when you're deciding on a platform. So whether it's going to be WordPress or Joomla or Wix or whatever it is, all that needs to be taken into consideration also. So when someone lands on your site and you want them to buy something, that needs to be a smooth transition as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course the platform you use, but also some of the plugins that you use.
That's the WooCommerce plugin. That's the one for shops. Yeah.
So you're right. That's one of those early decisions that need to be made as well. Yeah, Fred.
And what about subscribers? If you want subscribers who will get, every time you post something new, they will get a notification. Mm-hmm. So do you want that or don't you want that? That's another area.
It's another one that you need to sort of consider. And if you're going to do that, then you've also got to consider what do you call those?
It's like MailChimp and
MailChimp or Mad Mimi, or there's the WP. What do you call those?
Mailing programs.
Email subscriber plugins.
Yeah. No, it's not really a plugin. It's what we're talking about. Let's talk about MailChimp, because that's one everybody knows. When somebody fills in a form on a website and gives their name and their email address, their name gets added to a list in MailChimp. And so once you let's say you post a new post or a new blog, MailChimp sends a link or an email automatically to the people on that list, letting them know that there's a new post.
So it's like a client subscriber service.
Yeah.
Email plan is what I think it's called.
No, I don't think so. No, that's not the. There is a term. I just can't say it right now. However, but Fred, you are absolutely right. That is another decision that you need to make. Do you want people to subscribe to something? And that's falls into that. What do you want your visitors to do? Category, for sure. Okay, so now we've covered almost everything that I can think of. But there's so when we're working with WordPress, that's the content management system. There is a new version of WordPress that is out now. It's called Gutenberg, and it's a different style of creating a page or a post, and the style is sort of like what is referred to as a page builder. In other words, you're creating things in chunks, in sections, in various sections. And then those sections can sometimes be saved and reused in other ways if you want to, etc. So there was another version of WordPress. Now we're just referring to it as the classic editor. It's no longer being used by WordPress, but you can still use a classic editor plugin if you prefer to stick with the old way that WordPress used to function. Now we have this new thing called Gutenberg. And I challenge you all to do a bit of a Miss Google search with that word and see what comes up. It's not what you, it's an old-fashioned term. Anyway, so Gutenberg is WordPress's attempt at recreating what page builders did before. Now, what's a page builder? A page builder allows you to pull in certain sections and do certain things. How else can I explain that? It's really difficult to, but we up until now there are a number of page builders, quote page builders, that were brought into the classic WordPress site that allowed you to do all of these things. And there's a number of them. Elementor is a popular one. Divi is another. What's that other one, David? You started out with?
Beaver Builder.
Beaver Builder, yeah. So those were all page builders that allowed you to create various chunks of things and more easily. I'm sorry to see Alana has just had to leave. We say this goodbye and she's gone, but just with the recognition that life happens. So now this whole Gutenberg issue, because we were going to talk about it last week, and maybe we did a little bit, but we were going to talk about it a little bit more, or Elementor. I know that Nathan was wanting to talk quite a bit about Elementor, and I could see this morning he was here, but I could see he was having difficulty. You could tell by the look on his face he was having trouble with his computer, so maybe he's watching on the outside, hopefully. So Elementor is a very popular page builder right now, where you can take a little chunk and drag and drop, for example, that shows you how to do a button. So you don't need to know all the coding and all the background stuff to do that. You can just drag and drop a chunk, a section out of Elementor and drop it onto your page. So, and there's so many different things that you can drag and drop that allows you to use a lot more creativity, I think, is one way to explain it. It allows you to use a lot more creativity in the design and the building of your pages and posts. Can anybody add anything to that or question about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the main reason why this block concept came is because of the way people are browsing the web these days. They use different devices with different format, phone, pad, of different sizes. So the old way of doing things, if you have everything in one page, all of it, and you try to see it on a phone, it's going to be a messy thing. So what happens with the block thing is you have different blocks. So blocks can be rearranged as it is, as blocks. And that means it's easier to see, it's easier to read, easier for people to relate to the content, and not being bogged down by having to, I mean, if you have you don't have to go on scrolling down endlessly. That's the whole idea why the block thing came in. So we have to go to the block concept. We have to use the block concept. Don't ever put all the content in one page, one huge big thing, and expect people to read it. No, they don't.
And Vivek, you bring up another piece that we should have mentioned when we were speaking about themes, because that's one of the things you look for in an acceptable theme. Is does it give you the view that you would see in from a tablet or a smartphone, and does it allow you to rearrange things and create certain things that will only be picked up by a smartphone and not the desktop? And that was one of the things that I really liked about Elementor, was that it allows you to do that. Now, there are some themes that allow you to see what you're going to see, but some of them don't allow you to rearrange things in the same way as Elementor does, so that the smartphone picks it up in the way that you want it to be seen. Sometimes, for example, if you were looking at your desktop, you might want a nice big bold font, but if you saw that on a phone, maybe it's too big, maybe it takes up too much space, and so therefore you need to make a change so that it shows up in a different way on the smartphone. And of course, all of this has become incredibly important because more and the higher percentages of viewers are viewing from their phones these days. So we need to be really cognizant of that. Okay. And I'm looking at my time. Oh my goodness, we're way over. I knew we were going to come, but this is a lot of information. So I hope we've explained. Oh, there's one more piece that I needed to say. Various other experts out there are now recommending that now is the time for us to become comfortable using Gutenberg. Gutenberg is on WordPress, provided you are not using the classic editor plugin. However, sometime in November, there's going to be a major update to Gutenberg. And we're starting to see videos explaining all the things that Gutenberg, that new version of Gutenberg is going to do, mainly improving your your site speed. That has become a big deal. If your site is slow to load, people lose their patience and move on, especially from a phone. So that's one of the reasons why we need to start paying attention to Gutenberg now, so that we gain the comfort. We need to let go of the classic editor eventually. So what I have done is I've created a test site. It's called Site Rubik's in Wealthy Affiliate, where I'm using that specifically to play and practice using Gutenberg, because I'm very comfortable with Classic Editor, and I recognize the need for me to learn and develop some skill in that regard. So I'm thinking that I've got plans for a new website once I finish this current project I'm on. And I'm thinking that I will build the whole thing, do everything using Gutenberg. So that's another decision, that if you are creating a brand new website, you need to make up your mind about that. So, given that, I think that's all I wanted to say. Although I think I heard that it's targeted for possibly November, so it's coming soon. And there are various courses around where one person, Mayanna Stevens, we've had her on this show before. She is now offering courses on how to use Gutenberg, and you're going to see that popping up all over the place, for sure. So, given that, any parting comments or parting shots that you would like to make, folks? Fred, you always have the last word.
I appreciate it, Nolan. What comes to mind is how much there's involved, and I think anyone who's never done a website and they listen to this will appreciate what it takes to do a website.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe think, I don't want to touch that. I'm going to call Vivek or David or yourself or someone who at least knows how much is involved.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised at what we heard, because I've got 3 websites and I've never done half of the stuff that you've told me I should be doing. And I'm surprised I even have 3 websites, and maybe, and yet I understood because I've been through all that. I have to find the themes, and I had to do all, and WordPress is what I've used for them. So I think the person who's never done a website and they log into this is very helpful, because I realized it's not just simple. Yet it is become so much simpler than it was when you started and when everybody started.
Big time.
When we think of computers, the original computers were in machine code. It was 1 and 0s, and that's it. And that's still the basis of everything that's going on. Now we have all these different levels that make it easier and easier. You can drag things. Now, if you had to do that back when computers were first invented, well, they didn't even think you could do 99% of what we're doing now with computers anyway. So it's quite amazing to see how it's progressed and it's still, the basis is still 1 and 0s every time you're using. But now Gutenberg, it's doing like millions of 1s and 0s for you by just dragging and changing things. So it's phenomenal. So I think this was a wonderful introduction and sort of update of what it takes to do a website. So I thought it was very informative.
Oh, well, I'm glad you found it so. And I might say, from my perspective, in order to be a person who does websites, you've got to enjoy learning new things because it never ends. Everything keeps evolving, and changing. So you have to be ready to learn as you go. So, which is why I keep emphasizing it's all about experimentation. So, thank you, Fred. Any parting comments from you, David or Vivek?
I enjoyed the show. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of information, and if anybody ever needs help, they can get a hold of me through you.
Right on. So, thank you, David and Vivek and Fred for being here, and Alana and Nathan, if they're out there. And I see that Javita says, she says wealthy affiliate is a no-brainer. I think she may have done that before. And Generate Press, the theme Jay always recommends. She writes there, yes. And I'm very familiar with Generate Press, and I really, really enjoy using it. But there are lots of other good and interesting themes. So I have a former client of mine. Well, we actually traded services here in Victoria, who has moved his business to creating themes, special themes for special kinds of businesses. So that's how he makes his living, is making themes. So it's amazing, amazing what you can do. Anyway, I want to just bring us to a close now, and with a reminder, it's important to do what you love with passion. And just to tell you that next week we're going to look at how to build a course on your website. So today we talked about building a brand new website, and once you've got that rolling, quite likely how we did that. Vivek is the expert. He and I worked on my courses together. We used his knowledge and my grunt work. So we thought we would share just how we did that next time. So having said that, we shall see you next week. And I need to do my Alt 4.